Okay, Chair, I can confirm that we're now streaming live on YouTube. I'll hand the meeting over to yourself.
Thanks, Amanda. Good afternoon and welcome to East Devon District Council's Audit and Governance Committee on the 23rd of September 2021. I am your Chair, Councillor Sam Hawkins, and I'd like to welcome the meeting via the live streaming. Following the EGM of Council on the 26th of July 2021, I'd like to remind members and any members of the public attending or watching that this Council has delegated much of decision making to senior officers for a short period of time to the 17th of January 2022 due to concerns around COVID-19. Consequently, this will be a consultative meeting only, and we will adhere as much as possible to procedural rules detailed in the Constitution. However, where the meeting would have normally decided a matter, it will now make a recommendation to a senior officer. The officer will then make that recommendation. Take that recommendation into account when making their decision. I remind members that the Code of Conduct applies throughout this meeting. We also reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant who is disrupting the meeting by whatever means. Please turn any phone devices off or to silent, and in the event of a break in the internet connection, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. After 15 minutes, if we are not able to reconnect, we will consider the meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. If you'd like to comment, please raise your electronic hand and wait to be called. Any members of the public who want to view the agenda can do so by visiting our website, www.eastdevon.gov.uk. And we'll now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present.
Thank you. I'll start with you, Chair. Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Bailey. Councillor Barrow.
Present.
Councillor Cahill. Councillor Gazzard. Councillor Hookway.
Present. Thank you, Amanda.
Councillor Pook.
Present. Thank you.
Back to you, Chair. I can confirm your quorums.
Amanda, sorry to butt in. I'm a member of the committee and you didn't call my name.
I beg your pardon. Sorry, Councillor Hayward. Councillor Hayward's here. Thank you, Councillor Hayward.
Thank you. Agenda item 1, public speaking. There are no members of the public registered to speak. Agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. If anyone has a comment on the set of minutes from the 18th of March 2021, please do this by raising your electronic hand. If I have no hands raised, I will take this as an indication that you will recommend the minutes of the previous meeting to senior officers for approval. I have no hands, so I will take that. Agenda item 3, apologies. Amanda?
I have one apology, and that's from Councillor Twist.
Thank you. Agenda item 4, declarations of interest. This will be done by a roll call. Back to you, Amanda.
Councillor Hawkins.
None, thank you.
Councillor Barrow.
None, thank you.
Councillor Hookway.
None, thank you.
Councillor Pook.
None, thank you.
And Councillor Hayward.
The only one I'd like to declare is just a fairly tenuous one. Item 13, section 106 and SIL update. It's simply that 3 of my employers receive payments from those 2 schemes. That would be All Saints Parish Council, Charleston Parish Council, Newton Poppleford and Hartford Parish Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, late items, matters of urgency. There are none. Agenda item 6, confidential exempt items. There are no confidential exempt items which offers recommend should be dealt with in this way. And on to agenda item 7, internal audit outrun report 2020 to 2021 swap. And that's a report by Alistair, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, councillors. Yep, so this was one of the reports that was scheduled to come to your July Audit Committee meeting. It's to update you on the outturn of the 2021 audit plan. So it's to highlight significant findings that we identified through our work. So if members could first turn to agenda page 12 and 13. So this will show the work that was completed leading up to the July Audit Committee. And you will note that we found reasonable control frameworks in place for some key areas, such as procurement and corporate properties, health and safety. But there are 2 limited assurance audits that I do need to bring to your attention, and further details are contained within this report. Moving down onto agenda page 13, you'll note there are a few advisory reviews there as well. Most of these are in relation to follow-up work, and again, those details are contained in this report, so you can see what progress has been made on some of the recommendations we made earlier in 2021. Also, there's one review on here that I've brought to your attention, which is the baseline assessment of fraud maturity. So again, as an audit committee, you are responsible for overseeing the counter fraud arrangements in place. And that review gives you an overview of where the authority is in terms of its arrangements. That report I did send in its entirety to you back in early May, as well as the comparison report. So you should already have that. And that is also on your document library on mod.gov. So it's there for you to look at as you deem necessary. So moving on to agenda page 14. So this is where we would highlight any significant risks and detail the limited assurance reports. The first limited assurance report that was bringing to your attention in July was the first step digital transformation. So you can see the reasons why the project or why we awarded limited assurance. The project had been delayed due to changes in staffing, and so some key positions in that project were left unfilled at the point, so progress wasn't as quick as or in line with what was expected. So that project is behind. The next one is on agenda page 15, and this is the integrated asset management contract. This gives details of the scope and the findings and why we awarded partial limited assurance. One of the things I would also draw to your attention there is also what did feed into our review is if you look at the number of KPIs and their position as well, so overall performance, there was room for improvement as well with the contract. Moving on to agenda page 16, this is the GDPR follow-up review. So again, this report was finalised in May, so I appreciate some time has moved on. A number of the key actions hadn't yet been put in place, and so just to refresh members on what some of those key actions were. So it related to member and officers not receiving information security training, not all members and officers having received data protection training. We also identified some duplicate entries on the retention schedules with conflicting retention periods. We also were aware that personal data has been held longer than required as it was currently unable to remove it from the electronic data management system. I know there is a separate project in place looking into that. And also the information asset register was not up to date and was incomplete. So there's some quite important findings there. When we conducted the follow-up review, as it stipulates there, a number of them were in progress, but we're yet to be able to sign them off as complete. And revised dates were given and they run throughout all the way through to January 22. So our proposal would be to pick this review back up at a later date, but probably do a full GDPR review again to make sure that anything else hasn't slipped through. And that would be something we would look at doing in Q1 for the 22-23 audit plan, because the final date on some of these does run until January 22. Moving on to agenda page 17, corporate health and safety. Again, we can see progress has been made to implement a number of the recommendations, which is good to see. Again, COVID has caused some impact on the implementation of these. Since writing this report, and this report was written in April and bringing this to your attention for what was July, and we have followed up on some of the recommendations in the current review that we've got ongoing at the moment. And again, progress is being made, but they're not in a position to be fully written off yet as complete and implemented. So again, our proposal would be to re-examine this area at a later date, and so we make sure we keep that on our radar. Moving on to agenda page 18, this is the baseline assessment of maturity for fraud, and the details are there giving you an overview. So there's quite a few amber areas and areas to improve. Hopefully you all received and did look at the comparison report, so you will see that East Devon isn't too dissimilar to a number of the other partners that we surveyed on this. There are areas for improvement around counter fraud activities. So again, our proposal is that we would be looking to follow up on this assessment in the 22-23 to give you that assurance that improvements have been made in this area and everyone's moving in the right direction. Then moving on to agenda page 22 and scrolling down through, that just gives you a summary of the audit plan for 2021, and it shows you all the audits that were undertaken, the corresponding assurance rating and the number of recommendations that were made. So I do appreciate this obviously was a report for July and some things will have moved on, but happy to take questions from members of the committee on anything in this report.
Thanks, Alistair. Councillor Barrow, please.
Hi, a couple of things. Thank you, Chair. Page 14, firm step. It mentions that there were 54 processes that East Devon were organised on firm step at October 2020. Really, can you give us a comparison to how many the other councils were to see how we're doing? It says that it wasn't rolling out as quickly as expected, but really there's no context. Are we doing well now, or are we still not doing very well at all? And how many more processes are Exeter and Teambridge using through firm step? That's the first one. Thank you.
If I can, I won't be able to answer that question today, but I can certainly seek to dig out the necessary information and circulate it to all members.
Yeah, so as you will have seen from the other ones, are we way behind the other councils, or is it a bit, or not wanting exact, but can we have, do you know at all, or?
I'm afraid I don't. This was a review.
Okay, that's fine.
In Q4 last year, as I say, it was some time ago. So happy to make sure we dig out the information, as I say, circulated to you via email and all other members. Okay.
Okay, can I go on to?
I can see Mark's just put his hand up, so I don't know if he wants to chip in with a comment.
Yep,
sure. On that point.
So all I would say as well, I mean, by all means, I mean, I'd be interested in the data that Alistair manages to find, but all three councils also have different digital strategies. Sure. So where we might be in terms of our hoped for progress and where the other two may be in terms of their hoped for progress does also depend on the strategy and the policies that they're adopting with regard to digitalisation of service delivery.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Mark. Can I carry on, Chair?
Yeah, please.
The next one was to do with the integrated asset management contract. I do understand that we've had a difficult couple of years, but to see the KPI figures that are on page 15 of our agenda are very poor when it's the new contractor and we're paying them £10 million a year. That they've only managed to get 46% of KPIs as green, and actually 36% is red. That would, well, it'd be a red flag to many people in that contract. And you know, if we'd organised a contract that big, there would be a lot of upset if they were still paying at high rates. Any comment from who?
I think from my point of view, obviously we did reflect on the KPI performance, and it did also influence the opinion that we gave. In terms of comments back, I would probably say it's more of a comment for relevant officers to take forward.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, Simon, are you able to either pass the buck or step in?
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. I was just about to try and put my hand up. So we did, in anticipation of the questions may come up on this, and also in the risk register regarding housing as well. Unfortunately, someone from housing wasn't available to attend A&G today because of a number of different things happening on today's date in terms of interviews and things. But if it's okay through the Chair, I think an update in terms of where we, to the Audit and Governance Committee from Housing in terms of where we are with the KPIs now, and general an update in terms of the position on the contract, I think would be useful to your next meeting.
Okay, thank you. That's it for now. Thank you.
That's great, thanks. I just wanted to go back as well on this, the firm step point, and it's just a question for Mark. The comments here sort of indicate that it was kind of left to waiver, and it has a suitable officer now been appointed to take charge of firm step.
Yes and no. You may recall we took a report to Cabinet where we reviewed the structure of the comms team, and within that report we highlighted the need for some additional capacity to help with the firm step project. So there are fundamentally two roles that need to be filled. One of the roles, the sort of replacement role for the officer who left, has now been filled, albeit that officer only started last Monday, so hasn't had much time to get his feet under the table. And we're going out to recruitment for the second post. Andrew Hopkins, who's our sort of interim or consultant communications manager, is helping me in terms of taking a lead on that.
Right, so we've got a system in place just to monitor it in the, although it might be a sticky plaster, just to monitor it in the meanwhile.
Yeah, I mean, the only sort of caveat I would say is that, you know, the old system we used to use, which was Lagan, was that you would design a process and you would implement it through Lagan, but then actually needed to factor in quite a timely review of that process to understand the user experience. And I think that's also where we need to get to with the firm step processes, is actually be able to sort of phase or factor in a timely review based on user experience, because you know, what seems right, you know, when we first design and implement a particular firm step based service, you know, we do need that user experience feedback to say, you know, how was that, you know, how was it for you fundamentally?
Great, thanks. So I think that wraps up that item. We've got the request there for then the report on the integrated asset management KPI report to come to us next time. Do we need to go as far as voting on that, or is that just something that can be taken through the minutes, Amanda?
I'm happy to take that through the minutes, Chair. That's
Yeah,
what I
okay,
would
well, let's
normally
do that
yeah.
unless someone
Yeah.
shouts immediately.
Okay.
And on that basis, then we move on to agenda item 8, the internal audit annual opinion report for 2020 to 2021. And back to you, Alistair.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so if members can turn to agenda page 28. So this is the at a glance and gives you an overview of the opinion for the year. So as you can see via the dial on there, there were 4 potential opinions we could award, and we placed East Devon in the middle of reasonable. So again, it means that there are some gaps and non-compliance and areas for improvement in terms of achieving the overall objectives. And again, I think the work through the year probably alludes to that as a fair reflection. In terms of just giving you some comparison information, obviously each year the audit plan is slightly different, so we're not comparing like for like, but to just give you a feel for it, in 1920 you had 1 substantial, 11 reasonable and 2 limited assurance audits, so not too dissimilar. And likewise with the number of recommendations, there were 32 priority 2 and 28 priority 3s in 1920. So again, not too dissimilar from previous years. But as I say, I do caveat that you are not comparing like for like. Okay, moving on to agenda page 31. This just gives you an overview and narrative of the opinion itself. And as you can imagine, 2021 was severely disrupted due to COVID-19, and additional work was brought into the plan and additional support provided, particularly around the number of grants that were coming in. So it highlights areas where we picked up additional work around the COVID-19 emergency, and it also highlights, moving down onto agenda page 32, some of the more fundamental reviews that are quite important in forming our opinion. I do need to bring to your attention any limitations on our opinion, and as in previous years, I would just highlight that Strata is obviously subject to DAP internal audit services, so we don't cover the ICT controls, so you will need to get that additional assurance from DAP in terms of giving that overall opinion on how well the ICT controls are working, and I believe that is on the forward plan for them to come to your January audit committee to provide that information. Okay, moving down onto agenda page 33. So obviously there should be a close link between internal audit coverage and your corporate risks. And as you know, when we present the annual plan to you in the March meeting, it shows you where our reviews tie back to your corporate risk register or your service risk register. This just gives you an overview of where our work fell in terms of coverage during 2020 and 21. We're not expected to cover all risks every year, or all high risks every year. It's kind of to cover it over the medium term. So for example, where you'll see Growth Point and homelessness, those 2 are scheduled in the 21-22 audit plan for this year. So that gives you an overview of where the coverage is, and also it helps you understand what assurance you're getting for us around your corporate risks and where you might want to seek additional assurance or direct our work if necessary. Moving on to agenda page 34. So this is where we'd highlight any significant risks identified through our work. So when we undertake an audit, we obviously have an overall audit objective and a risk that we're working to see whether that risk has been mitigated. And after we've tested the controls, if that risk is deemed high at a corporate level, we would bring it to your attention. I'm pleased to say that even though there were 3 limited assurance audits, overall, they did not materialise as a high corporate risk in our view, even though the control frameworks were weak. Moving on to agenda page 37. So this just gives you an overview of the additional stuff we do over and above our annual plan that you see and get regular reports on. So as you're aware, we provide a member training session on audit matters. And again, as audit committee members, you should all receive our news roundup report that helps you understand the things that are going on and needs to be on your radar. And also some of the changes we're making in our audit process as well. And then moving on to agenda page 39, this just gives you an overview of audit plan performance. There was one review outstanding, which was the fraud risk assessment. Again, recognise best practice that there should be a fraud risk assessment in place for every local authority to help direct counter fraud work. We've helped management by producing that fraud risk assessment. And at the moment, I believe we're coming to the end of that document, and that will be something that hopefully we can share with audit committee members in the future. The other thing I would draw your attention to, we are subject to public sector internal auditing standards, and we have to be assessed every 5 years. And just to reiterate, we were assessed back in February 2020, and that was found to be in general conformance with the standards that are in place. And then just finally on agenda page 40 and rolling down through that, again, just summarises the work for the year. And again, as I've mentioned in my previous report, it's useful that you know what we have and haven't looked at and what has informed our opinion. So the takeaways from this is reasonable assurance is quite a good place to be. There's obviously room for improvement, but from our point of view, during the pandemic, the internal controls have remained and worked effectively. So that is good news from our view. Happy to take any questions members have.
Thanks, Alistair. Firstly, I think it should just be said well done to obviously all officers involved in throughout the year where we've managed to, a challenging year, still achieve a reasonable internal audit opinion. Councillor Arnott, please.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, Chair, may I just ask Alistair or Georgina and our officers, just looking at the S106 and SIL line there, obviously this came up and had a extremely valuable look at it, I think probably about this time last year. But I'd just like to sort of get a survey of opinions from SWAP and from officers about where we are now. You know, I think we were going to appoint some new resource, weren't we, and so forth. So that would be useful. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Alistair, I don't know if you've got any comment. We've obviously got the item as well on item 13, which might touch on this as well. Yeah,
I was just going to say that in our next report, we do bring back our findings and our follow-up work that we've done in this, but I do recognise there is a agenda item later that will also give an update. And I think without seeing any thunder, I think it is good news that the recommendations have been implemented, but there will be additional information later on the agenda.
Thanks. Councillor Pook, please.
Well, thank you, and apologies if I should know this already, but that first one, the operational audit of affordable housing, should that have been social housing? Because have we got affordable housing as well as social housing?
In terms of the affordable housing audit, that was looking at how the authority goes to make sure when it's negotiating with developers to make sure it meets its criteria for getting affordable houses into the marketplace. So not necessarily linked with the housing stock that East Devon own.
Yeah, okay, no, that's clear then. Thank you.
I've got a hand from Councillor Arnott, but I think that's historic from before. That's fine. On that basis, then, I've got no further hands, so we'll move on to agenda item 9, the internal audit plan progress September 2021.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So this is the only report that was scheduled to originally come to this meeting. So this is to update you on our 21-22 audit plan. So again, if members can first turn to agenda page 48, this will just give you an overview of the work completed. And again, there's good news there that the payroll, health and wellbeing have both awarded substantial and reasonable assurance. So that's good news in terms of controls. And you'll note there that we also have undertaken our follow-up work on the SILS 106 audit as well, which is contained within this report. So moving on to agenda page 50. So this is where we do talk about our section 106 and SILS follow-up audit. And as you can see there, all actions in our view have been completed and taken and are in place. As the Chair's already pointed out, there is an item later on the agenda from Ed that will be providing more details. So members may want to come in with more questions on that item later on the agenda. The other thing I should draw to your attention is on agenda page 52. So we've had some additional requests for work since the plan was agreed by you back in March 2021, and those are listed on agenda page 52. There are some additional reviews as well that we've had to pick up. So central government have, there's a requirement for us to look at and do some post-payment assurance work around the restart grants as well. We're still waiting for more details from BEIS on that, and hopefully that'll be coming through soon. So that's an additional review that will also have to come in. So there are some changes. We also discussed the SLT potential priority areas for quarters 3 and 4 yesterday at SLT. So again, to make sure all members of this committee are aware of those potential changes, I will circulate a separate report later this week just to make you aware of those changes and for you to provide comment on. I will also update the rolling plan that is on the audit committee document library, so you've got that in one place as well. As I say, I don't have anything else to update you on this report, so happy to take any questions from members.
Thank you. Councillor Hookway, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just refer you back to page 50 of your report when you're talking about the SIL follow-up audit? I've noticed that you've mentioned about 2 members of staff who are under contract until August and October, so presumably we've lost one. Are you happy that those members of staff no longer don't need to have their contracts of employment extended? Are you happy that they've done their work and we can move on from that, or should we be thinking about retaining them? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think in my view, I'd probably defer it to Ed if he's happy to come in on that point.
Can I suggest we ask the same question at item 13? I just think it sits in nicely at the end of that report. Okay. Just because it all brings it all together, if everyone doesn't mind.
Sure.
I can see nodding. I will take that as a win. Yeah. I can't actually see any more hands up on this particular question. So let's move on to agenda item 10, which is the revenue and capital outrun report. And that's with John, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is the annual outturn report as presented to Cabinet on the 14th of July. It covers the general fund revenue outturn, the housing revenue account, and also capital is included in there. There is quite a lot of detail contained within the report. I'm pleased to say that after a very difficult year, the council remains in a good financial position, and I hope that's reflected in the report. The outturn positions reported have been fed into the statement of accounts, and we're in the final preparations of those accounts. Whilst we've been resolving the last sort of outstanding issues, we have been starting the early groundwork for the 22-23 budget, and that's earlier than normal. So hopefully that will allow more time for the accounts audit later in the year. So once the accounts are finalised, the draft accounts will be published, and we'll be emailing them to the committee members before being brought back to the next committee. That's all I was going to cover. So thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks. I can't see any hands up, but I think as you've touched on, this report's already been to Cabinet, so that could be very well why. I've drawn out this sentence as long as I can, so we will happily move on to the next item then, please, which is agenda item 11, the risk review summer 21 part 1. My notes say Joe Avery's presenting, but I can't see Joe's with us, so does anybody want to take ownership of?
I can, Chair, if you like.
Excellent. Well recommended.
Thank you. So, yep, risk review comes to you on a regular basis. At the request of the Chair, this report is slightly different to what the committee normally receive, in that it focuses in terms of operational risks around the finance risks and housing risks. So they've been detailed in the report in full for the committee's consideration. At the next risk review, we'll then put in full the other services. It's just to break it up, so to give members more time to reflect on certain areas of the council. In terms of the report, still gives you an overview of the strategic risks and where they sit, and as I say, goes through the detail on the operational risks. Happy to take any questions, Chair. Again, if there are any detailed ones on housing risks, we may have to ask for written responses to committee members, but happy to try and answer any questions.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you touched on it there. I was just well aware this report used to come at once a year, and it was everything all in one big go that became quite unwieldy, whereas now hopefully breaking it up a bit throughout the year, although we'll see it a lot more regularly than we're used to seeing it, it will be more manageable. I did want to touch on the ones that are on my page 113, the delivery of Growth Point. The two items there say they're in planning and progress. I appreciate that's with Andy Wood, so there might not be anybody here today that can add comment to that, but I would have thought we were beyond now planning the enterprise zone and those elements of the organisation.
If I can, Chair, because you did raise that earlier. So I have spoken to Andy Wood. With all the various projects that the Enterprise Zone or Growth Point are working on, they have their own risk registers that they maintain for each project. But the corporate risk register does need updating and fleshing out so that members of this committee can get a feel for those projects and how they're progressing, particularly around Cranbrook and those areas at the moment. So he will provide a fuller update in future reviews on those particular projects.
Yeah, that'd be much appreciated. Thanks, because it just feels a bit weak at the moment compared to what does exist. And the other bit was on page 117. It's the one that talks about Brexit. Obviously, we know we're suffering at the moment with refuse collection. Seems to be a classic example about staffing. I'm not entirely sure it's tied in Brexit. I might be putting two together to get five. But are we happy that our controls are working and effective in that area, as it currently says they are?
That particular risk is down to myself and does need updating in terms of it's moved on from when the original risk was created. So the controls and the concerns that were originally envisaged haven't panned out as we thought, particularly around sort of investments and how it may be affected and other elements. As you highlight now, the risks are around the major contracts, but it's the element that's related to Brexit and the element that's related to other factors in terms of employment. But I will update that risk to capture those new elements. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. And there's just a point there, I guess, around making sure the owners of each item don't just mark these items forward.
Yeah,
I appreciate why they might want to do that. I can't see their hands up, so let's move on to agenda item 12, which is the partnership review. Back to you, Simon, please.
Can I just interrupt, please, Chair? I've noticed that you've not been taking a vote at the end of each item.
No, so
I'm not wondering if you. I'm wondering if you're leaving it till the end.
I was under the impression now, because we can only make recommendations to the senior officer. We were sort of informed that asking the senior officer to note a report that we received is a bit pointless, in essence. So if we didn't have any recommendations to make to the senior officer to move forward to the next item, but I'm more than happy to be corrected on that.
I was waiting for the chief exec to advise.
I was waiting to get my wrist slapped.
Well, no. The reason I hadn't said anything was I was sort of in sympathy with the chair, really. So yeah, if it is quite clear that the committee has a view on a matter which it wishes the officer to consider, then I think a formal vote would be appropriate. But if it is otherwise just sort of fundamentally noting, I'm happy that we proceed on the basis that you are just noting the report at this stage. Thanks.
That's the way I took it. So unless someone shouts at me right now I will move forward, and I'll probably continue in that logic. So please, everyone, do shout if you don't agree with my logic. Otherwise, I will plough on my merry way. Agenda item 12, partnership. Blah, 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 blah.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is to note unless there are any specific recommendations from the committee. So good practice in terms of publicly going through and reviewing our partnership arrangements, publishing that information to Audit and Governance in terms of just making sure that the committee are aware of our key partnerships, why we set them up, are they still meeting objectives, and for the officers to report. So I'm just happy to take any questions on any particular ones. There was a question raised in terms of a missing partnership, in terms of Sideshore, and I think that should be on the register going forward now. So we will have that particular partnership on. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Are we happy to move on? On to agenda item 13 then, which is the section 106 and SIL update. So I believe I'm handing over to Ed there. And Ed, you've already been primed with a question. So if you can cover that as well, that'd be excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I will try. So yeah, this report just picks up on the findings of the swap audit that's already been referred to with regard to section 106 and SIL. And I tried to just quickly summarise the findings and the actions that have been taken. So to just quickly run through those, there's obviously this large number of outstanding actions on the XCOM system. That is rapidly coming down in terms of the number of actions there. As has been said, we appointed 2 temporary members of staff. Unfortunately, the one whose contract was due to end at the end of August was leaving us anyway for a better role somewhere else. So we do need to do something about that. We have agreed to replace him and appoint someone else for a further 6 months. So we're currently seeking an agency staff to fulfill that role. The intention being basically to keep the additional staff in post until we are up to date, fundamentally, I think is the principle we're working to. It's actually working quite well in terms of the invoicing, and the money they're bringing in is more than obviously paying for the cost of having them. So that's working quite well, and we'll continue with that until we're up to date. So that's that. I think finding 2 in terms of the recovery processes. So yes, we're working through these outstanding debts. The recovery process is in place, and we're working through those. Participatory budgeting guide has been updated and is on the website, as is the public-facing module for Execom. Yes, I think in terms of findings, 3 and 4, those are completed. 1 and 2 are still in progress. And in regards to the question, we'll keep the resources in place until we're bang up to date. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Arnott, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Ed. I'm really pleased to see this report and where it's going, and although obviously it's sort of limited at the moment and there's work still to be done, I'm very pleased that this has happened. As members may remember, this was an absolute priority for our administration to get this sorted as much as possible, so that in particular, I think the result that we've now got, and the link is there, the East Devon PFM XCOM.co.uk, so that really any member of the public or any councillor can look and see what's going on, where they live in detail, historically as well. And it's a fantastic outcome, and I'm really pleased that this has happened. It's not for this committee to ever say, well, why wasn't that in place 3, 4, 5 years ago? You know, why wasn't it easier to find this information? I think we've debated that before. And I welcome what Ed has just said, that the staffing resource will continue to see this work through. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Rowland, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, even though I'm not a member of the panel. Thanks, Ed, for that update. It is pleasing to see that progress. It's been a pretty tortuous road, isn't it, on this particular subject? So we've had many conversations about it in the past, so it's good to see there's progress being made and there's staffing issues sorted out. I just wondered on the debt recovery, there does seem to be, I'm talking fairly parochially on this, I know there are some issues in Seaton with following up on some long outstanding debts on this. I just wondered what stage some of those actually get written off if you make a decision as to you've reached an end of a road and it's not financially viable to take any further action.
Through you, Chair, I mean, that's obviously an absolute last resort and is in accordance with the Council's debt recovery processes. So, I mean, if there's specific cases in your area, we can obviously look into those and update you on those. But I mean, effectively, it's only going to be if it's not financially worth our while in pursuing them. So those are likely to be very small debts, I suspect, where that would be the case, whereas often still in 106 ones are quite substantial. But it's a long process to go through before we get to the point of even considering writing them off. So that would be an absolute last resort.
Thank you. Got any more hands up? I will just check. So, Hook, were you happy that the questions were answered in this part?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was greatly reassured by Ed's response, and I also like to thank all officers for their hard work in trying to resolve this issue. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Hayward, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, my internet is all over the place. I'm missing a sort of fairly big lumps of this, so apologies if I'm asking a question that's already been asked. Through you, could I ask Mr. Freeman, and again, I'm declaring my interest as a clerk to parishes. The SIL payment due in April to parishes hasn't been paid. We're just coming up to October when the second tranche will be paid, and I've heard nothing more about that. One of my parishes has a project which is looking to spend about £100,000 of Section 106 money and SIL money and money that the parish has put aside as well. And that project will require the huge involvement of the 106 officer and other East Devon personnel, you know, Dave Cook, etc. And I suppose if I'm asked in either role that I perform, what's going on, I wonder if I could perhaps find out and seek some reassurance that money is going to start flowing, and that when requests are made for assistance, because the parishes can't do projects like this on their own, that the 106 resource is going to be available. Because there have been problems in the past, Councillor Arnott alluded to it, and we've hopefully gone past that, but we don't want to go back to where we were when projects stalled and money just sat in bank accounts and earned interest. And I know that East Devon has a considerable amount of 106 money in a pot, and the reports that we're getting are helping us to understand where we can spend it, whether it's sport, resilience, recreation, play, youth play, whatever. But from a parish perspective, and ostensibly I'm a clerk to parishes, I'd just like some sort of reassurance and comfort to know that we can get hold of the money when we want, that it is available, and the resource is going to be there for parish councils, because if not, they'll come straight back to us and ask why. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed, are you happy to come back on that, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would have to check. Certainly, to my knowledge, the April SIL payments were all made shortly at the end of the financial year. I remember signing them off. It may be because obviously not all towns and parishes will have received the payment in that tranche. It depends what development's taken place in that area. So I'd have to investigate what, if anything, was due to the parishes you're referring to. But I'm sure those payments were made, and we'll obviously be making the October payments in due course. In terms of resources, I mean, obviously our resources are still quite limited because we're still trying to catch ourselves up. As I've said, we've got the additional resource in place to help us to do that, but we'll do what we can to support parishes in terms of spend as much as we can, but obviously it's more than just the 106 resource. It's also in terms of, as you say, engineers in the street scene department and the communications team as well. So I think that's probably a wider discussion than just me in terms of what resources can be made available. We perhaps need to pick that up offline and have a conversation about what the project is, what the timescales are, and what resources are needed, so we can see how we can assist with that.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, everyone. Counts any more hands up? On the basis we've got no recommendation to make to the senior officer, I will move forward then to agenda item 14, the external audit plan for 2020-21, and that's with Grant Thornton, and we're joined today by Beth and Jackson. So I'll hand over to either one of you, please.
Thanks, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. So before I start, as you just said, Beth Garner's joining me today. So committee members who've been on the committee for a little while may remember that Steve Johnson retired earlier in the calendar year this year as the audit manager. So Beth has taken over from Steve as the audit manager for the 2021 and future audit. Beth's met officers, but she hasn't had an opportunity yet to meet with yourselves as members. So first of all, just wanted to introduce Beth to all of you. The first item on the agenda from us today, as you said, is the audit plan. So this was due to come to the previously cancelled meeting in July. This is the first of our formal reporting responsibilities for the 2021 audit and sets out our approach both to the financial statements audit and also to our value for money work. So I'll take each in turn and pull out some of the salient points from the plan and then invite any comments or questions from members. I think page 128 of the agenda pack is a good place to start. So this summarises a number of the areas that I would pull out. So in terms of the financial statements responsibilities that we have, we've identified 3 significant risks. So we have the risk of management override of controls, which appears at every organisation around the country. It's an assumed risk under auditing standards. We have to recognise that as a risk at all of our audits. And then we also have the valuation of land and buildings. That includes investment properties, council dwellings as well, and the valuation of the net pension fund liabilities. So those risks are common with the risks that we reported and worked on in the 1920 audit that was reported to you previously. As always, we audit to a materiality level. Our planning materiality level was 1.8 million, which was broadly consistent with the prior year value. And the trivial level over which we would report any adjustments or findings to yourselves as those charged with governance is 90,000. Now, as always, that's not to say we would ignore anything below that value, but in terms of our formal reporting, we would only report values over 90,000. Below that, in terms of our auditing standards, they're known as clearly trivial, given the value of expenditure that the council incurs annually. Value for money arrangements. So as committee members may recall, the value for money framework has changed for the 2021 audit year. So the National Audit Office issued a new code of audit practice, which has changed the value for money work that we're required to do, how we report it, and the depth and scope of that work. The new terminology refers to risks of significant weakness. There's no qualified or unqualified conclusion, as we've mentioned previously, but from our planning work to date, that includes review of minutes and documentation, we've identified one risk of significant weakness. So that's not to say there is one, but one area where further work will be undertaken alongside the work that we have to do against each of the 3 criteria around governance, financial sustainability, and improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness. And that's response to finding from the Health and Safety Survey, and I'll come on to that slightly later in the report. In terms of the audit logistics, as you'll recall, the 2019-20 audit was finalised in April of this year. So our progress is a little behind where we would normally want to be. Normally the audit plan would have come to you earlier in the calendar year. As we said, this was scheduled for the previous meeting, but it's in front of you today. At the time this was drafted, we envisaged that our audit would have begun in September, as was mentioned on a previous agenda item. The draft financial statements are still being finalised, so as yet, we've not yet started the 2021 financial statements audit, other than to undertake the planning procedures that we're able to in order to issue this audit plan. So the audit will begin in earnest once we receive the draft financial statements, and we will agree the timetable then with Simon and John and other colleagues. The fee for the audit at the planning stage is proposed to be £60,632. And there's some further information on the proposed fee and any variations from the PSAA scale fee in appendix to the report. So those are probably the key headlines. As I said, the next couple of pages then cover the work that we propose to do on those significant risks that we have identified. And then the following pages, so pages 131 to 133, then set out some further information on accounting estimates and related disclosures. This is one of the auditing standard changes that has come in for the 2021 financial year, which requires us to ask more questions of management and yourselves in respect of accounting estimates. The second Grant Thornton paper on the agenda today in relation to informing the audit risk assessment includes some information around accounting estimates. We're also required to ask management further questions that previously we haven't required to do so, and we will be doing that as part of our audit approach. So those pages set out some of the key estimates that the council makes, and also some of the changes to the auditing standards that have come in for this year. Page 134 sets out some of our other responsibilities and some other matters for the audit. As always, there's a number of statutory powers available to ourselves and local electors in respect of the financial statements. Those are set out at the bottom of the column on the left. We're also required to read the narrative report and also the annual governance statement and make sure that they are prepared in accordance with relevant guidance and are not materially different to the financial statements that we review. On the right-hand side, going concern is an assumption made by management that the account should be prepared on a going concern. Again, there's been changes to auditing standards, and in particular something called Practice Note 10, which means that the focus for auditors now is more proportionate, and in the public sector really focuses in on the continuation of the services that are provided by the council, either by the council itself or another body. Although in our value for money work, we then focus on financial sustainability and the finances of the council into the shorter and medium term. We've covered materiality already fairly briefly, so I won't go into that into any more detail, other than to say for the senior officer remuneration disclosures within the financial statements, we determine a lower materiality of £20,000 due to the sensitivity of those disclosures within the financial statements. And then the next two pages cover the value for money arrangements and the work that we're undertaking this year for the first time under the new Code of Audit Practice. As I said, the one risk of significant weakness that was identified thus far from our planning procedures was the responses to the findings from the Health and Safety Survey, and we set out some of the work that we will do to consider that risk a little further. As I've mentioned previously, we still need to provide a commentary against each of the three criteria set out by the NAO, so that will not be the only focus of our work. We'll also consider financial sustainability, as I've just referred to, governance arrangements, where this risk of significant weakness sits in terms of the NAO's guidance and suggested works, and then improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness as well. The logistics, as I said, will have moved slightly. We were envisaging bringing a progress report to this committee, but the audit plan is here. And at a future committee, at the November committee, I would suggest we would either be bringing a progress report or potentially an audit findings report, depending on how quickly we can begin the financial statements audit of the 2021, sorry, getting my years mixed up, 2021 financial statements. I mentioned fees previously, so that sets out the proposed fee at planning, taking you from the scale fee published by PSAA, some of the other variations that we've discussed at previous committees and have been previously approved by PSAA, and then new issues for the 2021 audit to take you to the 6632. The main one there is the additional work on value for money and the additional reporting that brings out. And on page 141 of your agenda pack, we set out some of the other services that we provide to the council. So we undertake certification of 2 grant returns effectively, so the housing benefits subsidy return and also the housing capital receipts return. And the council also has non-audit place and analytics subscription. So this is a data analytics service that's provided by a separate team within Grant Thornton. So we bring those to your attention. We don't consider that any of those threaten our external audit independence, and some of the reasons are set out on that slide. Appendix 1 is some of the changes to our auditing standards that I previously mentioned. I think at that point, I will pause and take any questions from committee members.
Thank you, Jackson. I just wanted to touch on the audit fee. So on page 139, there's give or take about a 10% decrease year on year. Do you think that's achievable? And I guess where does that 10% saving come from? Is that efficiencies with us, efficiencies with you, or something else?
Sure. So last year there were a number of proposed variations, some of which are set out in the fee around property, plants and equipment, pension, some of the things we've discussed a number of times. Last year there were also, in the final fee for last year, additional fees in respect of COVID-19 and the impact that had on the audit. And also some of the delays and issues we experienced in the 1920 audit, which led to it not being signed until April 21. So at the moment, our planning assumption is we won't encounter those issues again, and that's our hope, and that's certainly what we're working towards with officers and the finance team. So at the moment, I don't think I would say we're absolutely going to be charging additional fees, because I don't think that's our intention at the moment. Clearly, as the audit progresses, if some of those issues do return, or we need to consider those, we'll speak first of all with Simon to alert him to those issues, and then bring that forward to the committee at one of its future meetings. As always, due to the nature of the contracting arrangement, PSAA are the ultimate body who will determine the reasonableness of any variations, if there are variations set out. And until any variations are determined by PSAA, they're always proposed fees until that stage, and we issue that fee proposal to PSAA once the audit has concluded for each financial year.
Great, thank you. And I think I just wanted to touch as well on this. I know we're a bit TBC at the moment in terms of dates and that. Simon, I'm sure you've told me in the past that means we are still legally compliant, albeit it might be outside guided dates when we end up publishing information.
Sorry, Chair, do you mean in terms of publishing the final set of accounts?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we are, John will come in and probably correct me, but basically, along with most authorities, you basically publish on your website where you sit with the accounts, and that the dates that if you've missed the published date, that they will, when you envisage to publish them, and then you meet the legislative requirements. I think I'm right there, John, aren't I?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
That's correct, Chair. So at the moment on the website, there's a notice saying that the accounts will be published, and the notice will be updated. I suppose in the statute, the target date for getting audited accounts is the end of this month. So clearly, we're not going to be at that position. What the council would need to do to comply with the statute is to include in that notice on the website the fact that the audit is still ongoing. So the statutory requirement is to publish audited accounts or a notice to say that the audit is continuing. The other thing that has not yet happened, but will once the draft financial statements are published, is that the public inspection window will then open. So the local elector at that point is able to ask questions on the financial statements or the records, or also, if they wish to, make an objection to myself as external auditor.
That's great, everyone. Thank you for that input. I can't see any hands, and on that basis, then we will go over to Councillor Hayward, who has just shot a hand in.
Sorry, my apologies, Chair. I thought my hand was up, but it obviously went down again. Through you, can I just ask Jackson, just a question. On page 135, you touched on the materiality thresholds of 90,000 for triviality issues for majority. Can you just clarify the 20k materiality for senior officer remuneration, obviously due to the sensitivity of those disclosures, and just clarify how that's dealt with? I suppose my question would be, is that stating that if a payment was made of £19,500, that it wouldn't be checked? I mean, can you just clarify what exactly is meant by that figure and how it kicks into your audit regime? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, and through you, Chair. So we would absolutely be looking at a payment of 19,500. To be honest, Councillor, we look at every single number within that note because of its sensitivity. We recognise that our normal audit materiality is considerably higher than any of those payments, which is why we revise a lower materiality level. Effectively, as I said, we audit every single number within that note. What that is saying is, if we were to ever identify an issue with a number that was, say, £25,000 different to what it should have been, that in our view would be material to the reader of the financial statements. And if that wasn't amended, then we would qualify in some aspect our audit opinion. That's the materiality point there. But our work would, as I said previously, we'd look at every single number in that note. So hopefully that gives you an answer to your query.
Jackson, that's very, very helpful. Thank you, and thank you, Chair, for allowing me to ask.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, can't see any hands, so we'll happily move on to the next item, which is agenda item 15. That's the grant fraud or assurance report, and that's over to Libby, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides an update on the measures the Council has taken to protect against fraud and error for the COVID business grants. We're not at the end of this work yet, as Alistair alluded to when he was referring to the audit reports or the audit work, but we wanted to give members of A&G, Audit and Governance, an update on where we are, as obviously the grant scheme started 18 months ago. I'm also joined, just to say, with Andy Staines, who's our Revenues Fraud and Compliance Manager. He actually joined the Council in May 2020, right in the thick of the delivery of COVID grants, but he's played a key role in that programme of work. So if there's any questions for both of us at the end, I'm sure we'll happily answer. So as part of our requirement of delivering the grant programme, we've also been responsible for putting in place risk assessments and risk plans, both to cover pre and post assurance checks. And this is for part of the assurance reports that we've had to provide to BAYS. And within that, one of the actions was to update this committee, hence the reason for bringing this to you today. I just need to make an apology that the first link in the background papers is actually referring you to an older version of the first risk assessment, and I will make sure an updated version is circulated to members and we will get that link corrected. So apologies for that. Hopefully the report isn't too confusing. Obviously we have had a huge amount of different grant schemes to deliver over the course of the 18 months. And you can see under section 2.3, the table that provides the different schemes that we've delivered. So if I can start, the report is broken into 3 areas. So if we move to section 3 of the report, that was the initial grants that we delivered back in March 2020. Well, we actually launched them 1st of April, which was the small business rate relief and the retail, leisure and hospitality and discretionary grants, where we paid out over £43 million. Section 3.1 sets out our approach to the prepayment checks that we implemented. Obviously, the speed at which those grants had to be deployed was incredibly fast when we only got the guidance, but it was only announced on something like the 25th of March. So we were up against a very challenging and pressurised environment to launch those schemes. But despite that, we put in place a relatively robust process to manage the gateway of claims to minimise the risk of fraud and error. And again, that's the types of checks that we put in terms of like the PIN number, the two-stage authentication process is set out in the report. We've also carried out post-assurance work, and that included using Spotlight and CIFAS to review the grant claims as part of the post-assurance work. SWAP have also reviewed our risk assessment prior to this being submitted to BASE. And as the report highlights, from that scheme so far, 13 grants totaling 145,000 has been identified as paid in error. 9 of those have actually repaid, and 4 of the remaining cases that are still outstanding have been passed back to BASE for them to consider next steps. Section 4 of the report talks about the grant schemes that started in November and where we are with those schemes right through till the end of March. So we've got section 4.1 that sets out our approach to the prepayment checks, and we were able to take the learning from the original grant schemes to make that an even more robust process. We also use Spotlight as part of those payment checks, which was something we didn't do with the initial grants. We also joined forces with Teambridge and Exeter to develop a common form. I know that's not mentioned in the report, but it's worth highlighting to members today. And we were very much the lead on that on the majority of those claims in developing the specifications for the design for the forms through our firm step system. In relation to the post-payment checks, 12 cases have been highlighted for further checking, and this work is still ongoing. To date, of those grants schemes, 4 grants have been identified as being paid in error, and all of those have repaid. Section 5 of the report covers the restart grants that came in from April. That scheme only ended in July. We haven't started the post-assurance works on that scheme, and we're still awaiting from BASE the risk assessment template for that work. That is something we're hoping that SWAP will be able to help us with that work. So in summary, there's still work to be done in relation to post-payment checks, and there may well be further work identified by BASE and HMRC as they have taken details of the grant payments, and they will be making their own checks using their own data systems. So we will be happy to bring back a report, say in 6 months' time, to provide this committee with an update of where we are with the post-assurance works on the remaining areas that are outstanding. We have recognised as part of our post-assurance work that we will need to do a review of our small business rate relief cases to ensure that these are being genuinely claimed. And finally, just thought it was worth highlighting, SWAP did do a review of the fraud risk due to the impact of COVID-19, and they did provide a substantial assessment in terms of the deployment of the grants for the work we've done on them to date in terms of fraud controls on our schemes. So that was all I was going to say. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Libby. I just wanted to ask on section 3.4, where you talk about reclaimed grants, ultimately, is it the council or is it BASE that's the creditor in those actions?
It's I think it's going to be BAYS because we're administering the grants on their behalf. It was government money. We're waiting for guidance from them. They haven't, initially they were talking about, they would provide us information about what that recovery process would look like. But as the report says, we had to do the 3 letters and that's it. And now that it's back to them for consideration. So we're waiting an update from them. I expect it may become part of HMRC's work for the recovery of those payments potentially.
Great, thank you. Mark, please.
Just to say, I think you should take a vote on this one in terms of reporting back to BAYS.
Oh.
Great, thank you. When you say reporting back to BAYS, as in, what do you mean?
Well, the audit trail, if you like, that government departments normally require or expect to see suggests that in this instance, because you're agreeing there are no recommendations required, I think that would just be a formal sign-off would be better.
No, that's fine. Sorry, I thought you meant we were reporting something to BAYS for a second.
Well, I can do that if you want me to. But
I can't see any more hands, so I will make the suggestion then from the chair that I guess as the recommendation is written, members are content with the information provided and agree no recommendations are required. So if we're happy to do our ticks and crosses on that one, please. I think that's everybody.
Yes, I make that unanimous in favour, Chair.
That's great. Thank you, and thank you to Libby and Andrew for joining us for that item. On to agenda item 16, informing the audit risk assessment for 2020 and 21. Back to you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. So what you've got is quite a detailed audit risk assessment on your papers. This is to help Grant Thornton undertake the audit and the risks that they consider they need to assess during the financial audit. I've completed it with the help of other senior officers. It's come to this committee to ensure that as members, I've fairly represented your understanding of the answers to those questions as well. So the recommendation is that you accept the assessment that I've completed on the authority's behalf, but happy to, there's quite a lot of pages, quite a lot of detail, but more than happy if members have got specific questions that they've highlighted from the attached, I'm happy to address, Chair.
Thank you. I think you're getting away with it. It doesn't look like there's any questions. Do you want a vote by the committee as well to rubber stamp your response?
Sorry, Chair. I think that'd be useful from the audit point of view. Yes, please.
Excellent. Let's. I will happily move that again from the chair. Then that we do whatever the recommendation is. Well, members are content with. Yeah, members are content then with the management responses to the questions raised. So, if we'd like to do ticks and crosses, please.
That's unanimous in favour, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. And then finally, we're on to the forward plan for 2021-2022. I don't know if anyone's got any points they want to raise on that, or if any officers have got added comment to the information that's already there. I don't think that is then, so I think we're just happy to note that. I don't think we need to go as far as a officer recommendation, and on that basis then that will bring our meeting to an end, and I'd like to thank everyone, including any members of the public watching online, for taking part. However, can I just remind all those supporting officer will confirm when the meeting is no longer recorded or going live, and until then your comments will be live to the public.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Chair.